What is it that you like about sound healing?
I like that I can just expand and release, and it doesn't necessarily have to be talking. Whereas, talk therapy, talk, that may move something, but sound exponentially moves something right away. And I feel that I can, and sometimes you don't even have to think, you just lay there and things are moving, but it's a different kind of movement. You feel different things in your body, you have different sensations, there's colors, sometimes images, and all that information comes to you to help you relax and maybe find the answer you're looking for.
Because I feel like it gets the emotional level of what's going on with your body. It cuts through all of that mental chitter chatter and it gets down to what's really happening below the surface. And you don't have to keep mulling things over to release it from your body. The sound actually just allows that to happen while you're laying on the table. And so that's the aspect I like best about sound. I think the most surprising thing about sound healing is that it's so relaxing. You're not expecting to lay on the table and go into an altered state just from hearing sounds. That's something that is, I found surprising. You're there and you're aware that your body is there and sounds are happening around you, and yet at the same time there's another level that you go to, which then allows all these different thoughts, emotions, etc. to come in. And I think that ability for the mind to let go gives you clues to what's really going on underneath the surface. I think a good example was I had a woman on the table, and while she was on the table, she remembered that she really likes horseback riding. And she said, I had forgotten how much I enjoyed that, but being on the table and hearing certain sounds made me remember that that's something I need to do for my own sense of well-being. What intrigued you about sound healing?
I just intuitively responded to it. And I know when I went, Kay Grace is who I went to an introductory class. As soon as she did the different modalities, my body responded to everything. So I knew that this is exactly what I needed for me. And I knew it was releasing. And just like if you go to a massage therapist and they push something on your, a certain muscle and it releases emotion, or acupuncture was like that sound would release an emotion for me. And it was just very powerful, very, I'd never felt so expanded as when I heard a crystal bowl and felt everything, like my whole body was in humming, all in balance, all at the same time. And I thought, well, if I can do that with this, what else can you do? So that's one of the...
I think that's interesting because for me, my draw to sound healing was different. My first response to it was, oh, if it can do this, what else can it do? I was really interested in, coming from a feng shui background, I understood that everything is energy, and so moving into sound healing made me think about the other implications of that, how you're not working necessarily with an external space, you're working with the internal space of your body and the internal space of your mind, and then what else can come out of that because of working with sound. I found that really intriguing and finding myself wanting to know what tools were effective for what things and what has been done around it. That really drew me in. That.
Well, it's interesting. I like them all. I like a lot about everyone, but the bowls are really powerful. The Tibetan bowls and crystal bowls are very powerful. I feel like they can bring you to an altered state and very peaceful. And but voice for me personally has been very important. the night before I went to this introductory class, I had a dream, and in the dream there was part of it was a grandmother, but then there was a woman that in the dream said to me, "You have a weakness right here." And so I woke up and I thought, oh, that's pretty interesting. So then when I went to the class, I knew Kate sent around a basket with pieces of paper to say which modality she would use on you. I said I knew I was going to get crystal balls. Then she said, "Come on up here," and then she set me in front, and then she said, "Well, I've got this bowl I called the grandmother." So I went ding, ding, ding. Oh, grandmother bowl, okay. And then she started playing it, and my throat just opened up, and all this pain was releasing from my throat. So here, the night before, I have this dream all about this weakness here. She brings out the grandmother bowl, and I have a complete response from that area in my body. That was amazing. And I was hooked right then. Like, this is so perfect and so powerful. And as I said earlier, what can you do with sound? How it just moves things out. And I didn't even have really an intention at that point. So what can you do with intentional sound healing or sound movement?
The thing I find interesting about the tools is I remember when I was signing up for the classes, they're broken down into different categories for the different weeks that we were going to be learning about them. And I remember immediately dismissing voice. I was just like, I'm not a singer, I don't care. That's going to be boring, but I'll sit through it because it's part of the program, type of thing. And really liking the idea of the drum, the rattle, the real earth-based sounds. But then as we went through the program, I thought it was interesting because then I found myself really drawn to the tuning forks. I think those are pretty interesting tools because the drums are considered these big earth things, but the tuning forks really hone in on what sound can do. So they really bring it down. So I thought, that you could use those then on acupuncture points, couldn't you, and that type of thing. So those ideas are triggering. But as now, having spent a couple of years working with sound, what I know for sure is that my voice is the most powerful tool. That's the piece that I can really move things. And I find myself using my voice now with my bowls, my voice with the drum, with the rattles. It's a combination of those two things. And I think because my voice is so personal and you can really feel my intention behind it, that it's really so strong and so I guess in a lot of ways vivid for people when I do that. So I found that fascinating that some of the tools you think you're going to use, you don't use as much as the ones that, it's kind of like what you resist most is probably the thing you're going to use the most.
It's all going to be nice sounds and everything will be pretty and floaty and all these things. And my experience has been that with the bowls and with voice, that dissonance helps to break things up. So when Susan and I have toned together, at first it can be real, you're not at the same tone, it's kind of, you're off, and it's kind of uncomfortable, but it's moving energy. And then when we start, then there's at this moment we come together at the same note, and it's really powerful. And then we move together. It's like we know which way to go, and it keeps moving the energy and breaking things how they need to be broken up. And I just think dissonance is underrated.
Dissonance. But then I started thinking about it along the lines of, even when you bring two people together, there can be a dissonance, but once they come into understanding of each other, then it creates the sound that's bigger than the two people separately. So the dissonance really helps to, it helps people to understand that's where they are in a moment of time, that their mind is dissonant with what their body really wants to be doing. And the dissonance helps them to settle into that, going, okay, that's a normal part of life to have dissonance in it. And so when you take that dissonance then and then you can slowly work with it and go, okay, this is how we come into alignment with each other. This is how we kind of find our way. And I think it's a good sort of metaphor for what you do with life, to go with flow. It's like find the dissonance and then just ride the dissonance until it comes to harmony, because it ultimately will come to harmony.
Because our voices become entrained. It's like that entrainment.
Yes.
Start to balance, and it's like like a tuning fork. You strike a tuning fork, and all the other tuning forks are going to start vibrating at the same
Together. Yeah. So I think of entrainment as everything coming, all these separate sounds or people or beings, everything comes together into alignment. So it's like when the birds are flying in the sky, they're flying together. And so the entrainment is that ability to harmonize with each other and to be in the flow with what's happening.
I think, well, for me personally, I think for releasing emotions that are trapped in your body. I mean, your body holds on to things. Even like if you hit your knee or you break a bone, or your body, your DNA holds these memories of things, and you may not be conscious of what is being held in your body.
I think sound healing is effective on a lot of levels. And so I think the most straightforward way that it's effective is that it relaxes people. The example that I've had is most people who come, clients that come and end up on my table, end up falling asleep to a certain degree. And to me, that's really satisfying to have gotten them to that state, because they will wake up and say, I didn't realize I was that tired, or I didn't realize that I had sort of drifted into that state. And I think I really like that, because it makes people aware of how much they are not connected to their body. So that's one thing that I really like about sound healing. I think it's effective, like I said before, about getting to emotional aspects of what's going on in your life. Because you can think something doesn't bother you, and then you get on the table and all of a sudden it can bring it up right away. And I like the idea that when you work with someone consecutively, there is a trust that happens. And because of that trust, your body starts to allow more things to come to the surface and to be sort of brought to consciousness, to be released for what's happening. Mm-hmm. So I really like that aspect of it, that there's not an analytical aspect of it.
I feel like I'm me. I feel natural.
Do you feel like it brings you into your power?
Yeah, I do. I'm using my voice, which I know this whole experience has brought me to voice, which is really important. It brings me somewhere, and I'm hoping it brings the other person somewhere too. But I mean not like I'm off. I mean that it's just a very powerful feeling using sound and actually I like using sound collaboratively. I like using it with more than one person. I like when you and I do it, or with a group, it's exponentially powerful, and there's so much healing that takes place, and I just think it's natural. Everyone makes sounds.
Experimenting with sound by myself, and then experimenting with sound with other people. I find that I really like the mental aspects of that whole thing, because when I started, I didn't think about adding voice to like singing a Tibetan bowl. And so the more I start integrating these different tools together, I start learning how they can become more powerful. So recently I've started working with color and sound and envisioning the sound and just the whole idea, can you project color as well as sound into someone's body to help them heal? So I've really started looking at that aspect. And Julieanne and I have talked about using symbols and projecting sound through symbols. So projecting sound through the shape of a triangle into someone's body. That's pretty interesting. The collaborative piece is really fascinating because you never know what other people are going to do with sound and how they interpret sound and what's going to happen with sound. And I've learned so much from just watching other people just play with it and do different techniques that I never would have thought of. And I do right away. I think, oh, I'm going to put that in my toolbox because it's something that I had not thought of, but to have them do it, like, yeah, that's pretty dang effective when they do that. Mm-hmm. For an example, when a friend of ours, she does this deep breathing, and I remember the first time when I was on the table and she was doing the deep breathing in my ear, what I really liked about it is it relaxed me because it was like this, I was breathing with the sound that was happening around me, and it made me less conscious of my body on the table. But it really deepened my breath, and it felt like she was with me as she did that. And so I remember that as being a really strong experience of having her doing her, I don't know if she calls it yogic breath or whatever, but I just always remember that was such a nice feeling to have someone breathing with me as a way for me to relax and deepen into the experience.
Well, just to bring the triangle piece, because I used the triangle on Susan one day, breathing or sounding through the triangle onto her body, and then when she was done, she said, well, you can say what you said. You saw...
that I had the experience of seeing just a row of triangles down sort of cascading down my body.
And I went, oh, wow, because I just was drawn to do it, never even thinking, I didn't know what to expect with it, so it was interesting that she'd have this visual.
Okay, what can I put in my toolbox to use that I had not put together, and how can what's happening in the world and how can we bridge these different disciplines and use these techniques together to create a more unified or a more holistic field to work from when helping someone with health challenges.
I also think it's really good for anxiety, nervousness, anything like that. With a lot of the chaos in the world and can feel overwhelmed, it brings this very quickly can bring a calmness, and there's a way that you can tone or do. You don't have to have anything. You can just have your voice and an intention and release, and that's all you need to help you relax. It's where I tone up the chakras and down the chakras, and kind of like this little tune-up that I do up and down in the morning. I do it in the car on my way to work out. But that's the thing, you don't have to be in some sacred space. You don't have to do that. You can make your own sacred space wherever you are. Is there a sound to silence? Yes.
Part of that, after you've released things, is you come to a moment of stillness, a moment of silence, because it gives the body a chance to, once again, come into go from dissonance into the entrainment part of it, so that the moments of silence are very important. If you would not take time to pause, it suddenly becomes overwhelming noise. That silence allows them to readjust, because it's a very personal experience to be on the table. So it allows them to come back into more of what I call their public self from this very personal space. So the silence allows them to do that.
But then also it's going to continue that frequency when they leave and go home, and things will still be percolating, and they might have dreams or insights, or suddenly the same song comes to them many times and you read the lyrics. I mean, there's messages that happen for people after the healing too. Well, depending on who you are and where you're at. I think, and then who the healer is. So I think that I tend to bring people out. And I think that Susan tends to be more grounding And so sometimes people need to be grounded. You don't want to just leave your body. Sometimes you do need to be out there and just kind of taking a journey. So it really depends on the person and what they need, but you're definitely moving to an altered state, and you can definitely take journeys and have access to places that maybe you wouldn't on your normal day-to-day living.
You have to really embody your emotions, embody the things that are going on to really move them out and through. So you can leave your body and go elsewhere, but until you can bring it back into your body and feel it and get down to that cellular memory of what's happening, you're really not going to be able to dissipate it or release it or resolve it. So there is something to that, always being brought back to your body, because this is where we are. We're having our human experience in our body, so we need to bring it back into the body to be able to really release it from what's going on. First profound experience I had working with sound was the first time I held a Tibetan singing bowl over the woman on the table. And in doing that, I felt like I cracked open my purpose in life. It was very emotional for me. It was very, it was just profound for me that I had not realized that it was that act of doing that, holding that singing bowl over the person, getting ready to strike it, that had brought the most sort of awakened moment of my life so far.
First time I ever really used my voice, and I went to tone into her heart area, and her whole jaw went, it was like quivering, shaking. And then I do it, and I do it again. And then I thought, well, that's really curious. I don't know what that means. And then what she had done, she said, did you see how my jaw was moving when you were toning? And then that was, to me, a concrete example of what the power of the voice to move through your body and actually move your jaw without you doing anything. I mean, that the power of that frequency to go through you and move things. If just your voice can do that, that's pretty powerful.
With her voice, whether she's consciously aware of it or not, it's there, because I too have had an experience on the table where I was laying on the table, and normally I don't lay like this, but I was laying with my arms back, and she was toning into my arm, and it was literally moving on its own as she was toning. And I remember in my mind going, what am I having, am I being possessed? I mean, it was so crazy good, because it was not something that I could control or was controlling, but she was doing it just by doing that frequency in her voice at that moment. It was crazy good. It was crazy good. You learn as much about working with sound by being on the table as you do by actually working over people.
Yeah.
The two things together really teach you about how it works. When you're on the table, you understand vulnerability. You're giving them permission to read you. Of working the two sides together, it's that whole idea. You take the separate parts and you put them together, and you get this greater picture and understanding of what's available and what's possible. I thought it was fascinating when Kay had us do the example of separately we would take colored pencils on this, drawing of a human body, and then kind of mark it up as to what we thought was going on in the body, and then separately you would bring it together then, and the people would 9 times out of 10 would have the same things and the same ideas about what was needed for the body, what needed to be happening, or what issues were happening. And so I thought that was always really cool.
I think too, when you're talking about being on the table, just as I'm a very mental person, so I tend to go to my mentally be stuck up there, and realize that even if I'm having a session and I'm really having a hard time getting out of my head, I know that stuff is still happening. I don't have to be in this total Zen place to get it to work, and that's satisfying for me because it's hard. It's hard sometimes to be completely present. This helps you to be present, but sometimes you can't get there all the way without some help, without, you know.
I also think it's important for people to realize that when you work with your own body, it can be surprising what comes up and what comes out. Because when I've done sound healing sessions on myself, I've literally been surprised that I can bring myself to tears, not expecting that. So I would just tone a sound and somehow just knew, keep working with it. And all of a sudden I'd be bringing myself to tears going, where did this come from? How did this happen? I think the sound helps you to understand what's really happening and what you have maybe suppressed emotionally or held on to emotionally. And so working with songs a lot of times can help you to do that. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily that you have to do the whole song, but there's always like a phrasing or there's a sound in there or certain lyrics that just, if you just keep repeating those.
Well, I can think of with Susan, I brought a song because I'm kind of the song person. I tend to get messages about songs for people. So we were doing a session and I put one on, this is a song you're supposed to hear. Well, it's Feeling Groovy from Simon and Garfunkel. I'm like, I have no idea, but listen to this. Well, and it brought up emotion for you. You totally were like totally surprised, as I remember. Like, why would you pick this? But it moved something.
It took me back to sort of childhood, and I wasn't expecting that would be a song that would take me back to childhood. And for me, it made me remember what that felt like to be a kid, to be out in the sunlight, to be just carefree, and you're just skipping along and doing. So that song totally brought up that whole emotional feeling around it. That was pretty. It was pretty fun to experience at the time.
Yeah, so you never know what is going to do it. That's the thing. You can't judge what's going to work.
Right.
You can't really put a judgment on it. Well, I don't, you can try. I mean, you can do that. You can say, well, this is never going to work. But if you don't try it, you never know.
We have another person who has a cello, and when she lays it on your body and she plays the cello, that deep resonance of that sound on your body just feels so good. Mm-hmm. It really grounds you and it gets you in your body, but it just feels so good. But it also reminded me of the idea that people who play instruments in an orchestra, in a band, as they're playing, they're giving themselves these sounds. And in some ways, they actually are working with sound healing on their bodies. Because one of the beliefs is that we all have a sound. Our bodies, each body has an individual sound. It's like when you hear that in a song, that's why you really like a certain song. Somehow it matches with your frequency of your body, and it really helps you to, I think, feel empowered, strong, present, happy, all of those positive emotions.
Good.